for Education and Statistics at Statistics Canada. She has worked for 6 years on the Education and Labor Market Longitudinal Platform team, where she oversees data integration projects. Laura enjoys helping data users understand how the platform works and ensuring they have access to the best data to answer their research questions. So with that, I would like to turn the call over to Laura for her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sadie, and thanks to Mike as well for having me. My name is Laura Gibson McGregor. As Sadie said, I'm an analyst in the Canadian Centre for Education Statistics at Statistics Canada. And today I'll be presenting to you the Education and Labour Market Longitudinal Platform. So first, we'll go over what files make up the platform, and then we'll chat a bit about possibilities for uncovering insights at the community level from these data. Then we'll have time for questions at the end, but you can also ask questions along the way as well if you have them. So a good place to start is what exactly is the Education and Labour Market Longitudinal Platform? So it's not a large integrated data set, as is sometimes commonly thought, but rather it's a relational data environment. So what that means is that it's an environment that allows the integration of anonymized variables from core education-related administrative sources with those from other selected data sets. It provides access to longitudinal cohort analysis for a better understanding of student pathways through the post-secondary education system and the impact of education and training on career prospects and things like earnings. It doesn't contain any personal identifiers, so any data source that is included in the ELMLP has been anonymized. They use anonymous linkage keys, and those keys are created in our social data linkage environment. On a related note, I'll just take a moment to cover our commitment to data security at StatCan. As part of our mandate, guaranteeing the security of sensitive statistical information within StatCan is a top priority. We deploy state-of-the-art tools and processes that prevent disclosure and ensure the confidentiality and privacy of individual data, and only aggregate non-confidential data are released outside of StatCan. So there's 3 core files of the ELMLP that are updated on an annual basis. These are the post-secondary student information system, the registered apprenticeship information system, and the T1 family file tax data. I'll describe these all in more detail in a moment, but first I'll just note that if you're familiar at all with PCIS or RAISE, you might notice that not all of the years are available in the ELMLP. This is because a certain level of completeness is required to construct files for longitudinal analysis, and generally more recent years have fewer data gaps. So the post-secondary student information system is available from the 2009-2010 academic year onward, and it's a national administrative survey on enrollments and graduates of Canadian public post-secondary institutions. PCIS collects information pertaining to the programs and courses offered at an institution, as well as information regarding the students themselves. And this information is all available in cross-sectional PCIS files. So within the MLP, those files can be linked longitudinally from that 2009-2010 school year onward. PCIS data are updated annually in the RDCs, the research data centers, and the most recent year available is the 2022-2023 academic year. The next core file is the Registered Apprenticeship Information System, which is available from 2008 onward. The Registered Apprenticeship Information System, or RAISE as we call it, compiles data on the number of registered apprentices taking in-class or on the job training in trades that are either Red Seal or non-Red Seal, and where apprenticeship training is either compulsory or voluntary. It also compiles data on the number of provincial and interprovincial certificates that are granted to apprentices or trade qualifiers, also known as challengers. RAISE is also updated annually in the RDCs, with the most recent year being 2023. And then the third core file is the T1 family file tax data for PCIS and RAISE. So the T1 family file is a source of data on income, tax credits, and deductions for individuals who have completed a T1 tax return and their dependents. The T1 family file that's part of the ELMLP is limited to just the population of pieces and rays. So to be found in the T1FF of the core files, an individual must be present in either the pieces or rays database for at least one reference year. The platform also includes a couple of other special T1FF files that represent other populations, such as elementary and secondary students in BC. And the number of tax records in the T1FF file is not limited to the number of years an individual was in school. So as long as an individual was present in the pieces or rays for at least one of the years, all of their available tax records from 1992 onward will be included in the tax file as long as they're present in one of those databases. And like pieces and rays, the pieces rays T1FF file is updated annually in the RDCs, and the most recent year tax year is 2022. So to recap, the ELMLP is based around three core files: the post-secondary student information system, the registered apprenticeship information system, and the T1 family file tax records for individuals who were found in either pieces, rays, or both. And then in addition to the three core files, there's more than 15 supplementary files, which is where the research potential really gets interesting. On the left side of this diagram are what I'll refer to as type 1 supplementary files, which are concordance key files. On the right side, there's what I'll refer to as type 2 supplementary files, which are microdata files. All supplementary files can be integrated with the pieces, the rays, and the pieces rays T1FF file. The little cross icon that's next to some of the files indicates that the target file for those keys is a survey, so only a proportion of the population is represented. Everything else without a cross icon is an administrative data file. So before I go into detail on the individual files, I'll just explain the two ways that files within the platform can be merged. So the first way applies to what we call type 1, which is where you have two files, let's call them file A and file C, and they have separate, different anonymized IDs that can be representing the same person. So for these files, you need a concordance key file to act kind of as an intermediary. So for example, PCIS and Census 2016 use different ID variables. So you need the PCIS rays Census 2016 concordance key file to integrate them together. The second way is where those ID variables are the same on the two data files that you want to merge. So in this case, you have file A, file B, and they both use an anonymized ID variable that's present on both files, which is called register group ID. And an example of this is the PCIS and PCIS rays T1FF files both have that register group ID, so you can merge them together without the need for a separate concordance key file. And that's true for the three core files. So PCIS, rays, and PCIS rays T1FF can all be merged without a separate key file. So the first kind, type 1 concordance key files, are used for integrating PCIS and rays with other Statistics Canada data files. The population covered by these keys includes individuals found in PCIS, rays, or both. And data users must request the microdata files plus the concordance key separately. So we'll start with the first two type 1 files on the left, which are concordance key files between PCIS and rays and the 2016 long-form census and the 2021 long-form census. Note that these keys are for the long form only, so integration is only possible for up to 25% of individuals. If you use Census 2016 or Census 2021 key, though, you'll get access to a bonus file, which is a file of alternative weights for using with PCIS. So without these special weights, census information is weighted to the general Canadian population, not the PCIS population. So using the weights allows users to make inferences about the PCIS population instead. Next, we have the Longitudinal Administrative Data Bank, or the LAD, which is a longitudinal file designed as a research tool on income and demographics. It's based on the T1 family file tax data, and it's available from 1982 to 2022. And And the value that the LAD adds to the platform is that it can be used to create control groups or do residual group analysis. So in most cases, this means looking at individuals who never enrolled in post-secondary education or an apprenticeship, and therefore wouldn't be found in PCIS, RAISE, or the associated tax file. The LAD includes a 20% sample of the population. We also have a concordance key file for the Longitudinal Immigration Database, or the IMDb, which includes administrative immigration data for all immigrants since 1952 and non-permanent residents since 1980. Not all of the years can be integrated with PCIS and RAISE. I think it's from 1980 onward. And outcomes from this population are available from tax files since 1982. Currently, we have 2 cycles of the National Graduate Survey integrated in the platform. Each cycle of the NGS collected information from persons who graduated from public post-secondary educational institutions in Canada 3 years before the survey. So the 2018 cycle includes graduates from 2015, and the 2023 cycle includes graduates from 2020. NGS questions focus on academic path, funding for post-secondary education, including government-sponsored student loans, and transition into the labor market. And I'll just note that the National Graduate Survey will only integrate with PCIS, not RAISE, since apprentices were not included in the survey. You'll notice as well that one cycle is on the left side in the type 1 list, and the other cycle is in the type 2 list. And that's because the 2018 cycle requires a separate concordance key file, but the 2023 cycle has the keys directly on the microdata file. And for apprentices, we have the National Apprenticeship Survey. The National Apprenticeship Survey is a sample survey that looked at factors affecting the completion, certification, and transition of apprentices to the labor market. And there's currently only one cycle that's been integrated with the ELMLP. Next, we have the Emergency and Recovery Benefits file. This data set is intended to cover the major income support measures that were offered to Canadians as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The most well-known of these is the CERB. And these linkage keys that we have in the platform were created before the CESB, or the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, was available as a data source at StatCan. So the keys can only be used to look at CERB benefits from 2020. We also have a concordance key file between PCIS and RAISE and the Employment Insurance Status Vector, which is an administrative data set that follows the trajectory of employment insurance claims and benefits payments from application to termination. And it's available from 2007 to 2022. And then finally, we have the Survey of Approaches to Educational Planning, or the SAPE. The SAPE gathers information from parents and guardians about strategies that they use to prepare for their children's post-secondary education, their financial plans for paying for their schooling, and the barriers to saving for higher education. I'll note that only the 2020 cycle of SAPE has been integrated with the platform, and since the children were between 0 and 17 years old at the time of the survey in 2020, the integrated use of SAPE is quite limited at this time. So this is more for the future. So that's everything for the type 1 files. Type 2 files, as I mentioned earlier, are microdata files that have the anonymized key built into the microdata file for integrating with PCIS or RAISE, or the PCIS RAISE T1FF. The data files in this list are generally provided by external organizations such as Employment and Social Development Canada or Provincial Ministries of Education. And many of these files have their own specialized tax files or concordance key files that include all people in that microdata file, regardless of whether they were in PCIS or RAISE. So the first type 2 file on the list, well, the second after the NGS, is the Canada Apprentice Loans. These are loans that are offered by the Government of Canada to persons registered in Red Seal apprenticeships who take block technical training. These data are provided to us by ESDC, or Employment and Social Development Canada, as are the next 3 type 2 files. The Apprenticeship Grants file includes 3 types of grants: the Apprenticeship Incentive Grant, the Apprenticeship Completion Grant, and the Apprenticeship Incentive Grant for Women. These files include data from 2007 to 2024. Next, we have the Canada Student Financial Assistance Program, which was formerly called the Canada Student Loans Program. And it provides non-repayable and repayable student financial assistance to eligible students to help them access and afford post-secondary education. All provinces and territories participate in the CSFA except Quebec, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, who receive alternative payments from the Government of Canada and then administer their own student financial aid. There's also a specialized T1FF tax file for CSFA individuals and concordance key files between the CSFA data and the Census 2016, Census 2021, the LAD, and the IMDb. We also have the Canada Education Savings Program, or CESP, which is the directorate within ESDC responsible for administering the Registered Education Savings Plan, or RESP, and other associated benefits. So some of you are probably already familiar with RESPs. Maybe you had one for yourself, or maybe you have one for your kids. But they're a type of savings vehicle that are used by individuals to save for children's post-secondary education. The CESP data include contribution and transaction information, a specialized tax file, and concordance key files for the 2016 census, the 2021 census, and the Longitudinal Administrative Data Bank, or the LAD. Another interesting thing about this file is that primary caregivers and subscribers are included in the concordance key files and tax data. Most records in the file have subscriber information, and just about half have primary caregiver information. Next, we have the British Columbia Kindergarten to Grade 12 dataset, which is provided to us by the BC Ministry of Education and includes person-level information for students attending or who have previously attended BC's public and independent schools. It's our longest spanning dataset, going from the 1991-1992 school year to the 2021-2022 school year. And the data in this file include information about student characteristics like gender, age, and geographic location, and about progress through the education system. So things like graduation, foundation skills assessment results, exam marks, etc. And also available as part of this project are tax data for the BC K-12 students and concordance keys between BC K-12 and the 2016 long-form census, as well as the 2021 census. There are a few bonus files also for the BC K-12, although you have to request those individually. So there's a tax file for the parents of BC K-12 students of select years, which can be useful for measuring the effect of parental income on the pathways of children. There's also concordance keys between the records of employment file and the BC K-12 students and parents, as well as a concordance key file between the BC K-12 parents and the 2016 census. I'll just note that the parent files and the record of employment keys came from an independent researchers project and funding, and as such, they're not updated every time the BC K-12 data are updated. Next, we have the parental income variant for the PCIS raised T1FF file. So this file was developed by analysts on our team, and it includes derived variables that are based on the parental income information in the PCIS raised T1FF file. And this file is designed to make that analysis a little bit easier. It comes automatically with the PCIS raised T1FF, so if you have access to that file, you don't need to request this variant file separately. And I'll just note that it's best for use in years where a student filed a tax record or filed a tax return for themselves at their parents' residence. So for example, a teenager working a part-time job or a post-secondary student working a part-time job and reporting their parents' residence as their primary residence. And last but not least, we have the Ontario grade 9 to 12 data, which is the newest addition to the platform. The Ontario 9 to 12 data include information about student demographics, academic achievement, course selection, and graduation. The data are divided into two files. One contains students who entered grade 9 in the 2009-2010 through the 2015-2016 school years, and the other contains students who were in grade 12 in the 2013-14 through 2021-2022 school years. And I'll save you the math. There's considerable overlap between the grade 9 and the grade 12 cohorts, but the difference is that the grade 12 cohorts include students who moved to a school in Ontario after grade 9. There's also a specialized T1FF outcome file for these students covering tax years 2009 to 2021. So to recap, the ELMLP, or the ELMLP, as we sometimes call it, is not a large integrated data set, but it's a relational data environment. It uses unique anonymized IDs to allow integration of data files while still protecting confidentiality. There's 3 core files in the platform: PSIS, RAISE, and the T1FF, and more than 15 supplementary files that are either concordance keys or other microdata, all pertaining to students and registered apprentices. All supplementary files can be integrated with the 3 core files. And the core files and some of the concordance key files, so like the IMDb key, the census keys, and the LAD, are generally updated in March of every year. Other supplementary files are updated on an ad hoc basis. So after seeing how many data files make up the platform, it's easy to imagine all the possibilities for pursuing interesting research questions. You might also be wondering, how can the ELMLP team help me to meet my own program needs? So the first way that we can help is by performing custom tabulations. I understand that this group is mainly interested in custom tabulations, but there are also options if you wish to answer more complex research questions, like those involving multivariate analysis. And if that's the case, you can submit a request to access the required data files through the research data centers. And finally, when the data needed to answer a research question aren't currently in the platform, it's possible for data users to request additional files be integrated, either as an addition to the platform that would be accessible by other researchers or as a custom integration project. However, this type of project generally takes several months to complete, and like with custom tabulations, the researcher would be responsible for funding the work. If you're considering a custom integration project, it's also really important to establish your research questions beforehand so we can determine whether data integration will effectively meet your needs. So for more information about options 1 and 3, please contact our client services team at the email on the screen, and I'll be sharing the slides after, so that link will be there for you. For RDC access, you can contact the RDC analyst working at the most convenient research data center to you. And I also have to add a shameless plug for the ELMLP newsletter, which I help produce. A full list of all the RDC projects and researchers is published 3 times a year in the newsletter, as well as data updates and product releases from StatCan. So if you're interested in being added to the distribution list for the newsletter, please reach out to me. And as far as custom tabulations go, there are simple requests and then there are more complex requests. As the complexity increases, so do the time required to complete it and the cost of the work. So simple requests for custom tabs use pre-existing methodology. So they produce estimates like you would see in our annually produced tables. So things like persistence rate, meaning how many students who start a program in a given year are still enrolled at a future time point, graduation rate, and employment earnings. And I've added some links on slide 35 to our annually produced tables that for each of these items. And a simple request, you can make a small change like refining to a specific subpopulation. So for example, employment earnings of graduates from the GTA or geographic mobility of healthcare graduates specifically. Then we have more complex requests. So complex requests require extra coding or development work, such as using derived or modified variables, including additional data sources like census or student loans information. And these need to be completed by someone with a higher level of knowledge about the workings of our production systems, and those people need to have advanced coding skills. So an example of a complex request would be adjusting income of a graduate based on their family size, employment income of new students, regardless of graduation status. Traditionally, we only look at employment income of students who have graduated. Finding the median of the sum of employment income over a 10-year period, or looking at the count of graduates by racialized identity, which would involve census data. So now we'll talk a little bit about what's possible at the community level. So currently we don't produce any data products that are at the community level. using ELMLP data, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done. The biggest limitation with small geographical areas, which is probably something that you encounter if you're in the business of working with community level data at StatCan, is our vetting rules. So vetting rules are basically a set of rules dictating what can be published to ensure that we protect the confidentiality of the individuals that are behind our data estimates. So put simply, it's harder to get useful information from tables with many small cells. So when making specs for a custom tabulation request, it's important to consider what might narrow down your cell size. Things like the size of your population of interest, which is probably the most important one. Education levels of interest. Certain programs like bachelor's degrees or college diplomas are more common, so you'd have more people to study. Some less common programs like a medical degree or a doctoral degree will have naturally fewer people. So your cells are going to start out a little smaller. Demographic characteristics, things like age groups, gender, Canadian or international students, whether you're looking at either or both. And characteristics from census have a bigger impact on sample size than those from PCIS. So age, gender, and status of student are available in PCIS, but if you wanted to look at something like racial identity, then you would need to bring in census data, and that impacts how many people you'll be able to study. Also, your outcomes of interest, important to know that, and the level of detail of field of study. So when it comes to field of study, you can look at SIP primary groupings, which are kind of the highest level, highest rolled up level of classification of instructional programs. Or we also have a STEM and BASE variant, which just divides students into whether they fall into a STEM category or BASE, which is business, humanities, health, arts, social science, and education. And because you're only dividing people into those two groups, you can usually get a little bit more detail in other areas like geographical level or things like that. So we'll always try to work with you to come up with a solution to your data needs, but knowing your answers to the items in this list, and especially how you would prioritize them, is really helpful. And then finally, I'd just like to share a case study of ELMLP data being used at the community level. So a few years ago, Invest in Canada partnered with StatCan's Centre for Special Business Projects on a project where the objective was to determine the pool of STEM graduates available across Canada and to look at their mobility after graduation. And when it was possible, they looked at the Census Metropolitan Area, or CMA, level of geography and at individual STEM fields of study. And the purpose of the project was to help Invest in Canada advise foreign investors on the nature and the distribution of STEM talent in Canada. The detailed geographical data isn't available on their website, but it is cited in the article that I have linked on the slide. And I also included a link to Invest in Canada in case you're interested in just seeing what they're about. So this concludes my presentation for this afternoon. I have included a couple of useful links on the slide. So the first two items on the slide are our annual releases that the first three items that we sometimes call student pathways and graduate outcomes, and geographical mobility is the newest one. And these are the ones that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about custom tabulations. And then the fourth item is our overview of the education and labor market longitudinal platform user guide, basically, which covers much of what I presented today. And if you have questions that you'd like to ask me offline of the presentation, but online for email, you can email me at the address on the screen. Or if you want to sign up for the ELMLP newsletter, please also don't hesitate to contact me. And I've got a little slide for Amanda. So Amanda, you can take it away if you like.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I recognize one or two names. in the chat. So for those who aren't aware, I suspect many of you are, our team, we often receive requests from data users in general. So it comes to us, you see the emails addressed at the bottom, infostats@statcan.gc.ca. Laura so kindly offered to be a direct contact. Sometimes it's easier to go through InfoStats. If Laura's away and you have a question related to the platform, our team may or may not be able to answer the question. So she kindly shared it, but we like to think of ourselves as the first point of contact of StatCan, and we're set up that way to respond in a timely manner. And we do a lot of fun things for data users, such as organize webinars like the one we have today with the community data program. So yeah, if you have any questions that are unrelated to the ELMLP, related to StatCan data, we are happy to hear from you. So thanks, Laura, for that really, really interesting presentation. If you don't have any questions, I have a lot, because I feel like there's a lot of food for thought. So if I don't see enough questions, Laura, I might ask you one or two.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura, for the great presentation. So informative. And thank you, Amanda, for kind of sharing that about the Data Service Center. So everyone, please put your questions in the chat box. You can use the raise hand kind of button and then ask your questions when you unmute your devices. I think we have one question that's asking about understanding these various with difficulty of the request, but what is the range of timeline and cost of a simple custom tabulation?
That is a great question. Timeline, there's another group of people on my team who are like really the wizards with custom tabulation, so they would better be able to answer your questions. I think timeline usually, like I would say minimum is probably like 10 to 12 weeks. But I'd have to ask specifically. Cost, it really depends on, like I said, the complexity. I think usually they would start like hovering around 10,000, but again, it depends on the specs and how much development and testing might be required. Christine, I don't know if my supervisor Christine is here. I don't know if she has differing opinions on those ballparks I just gave, but
yeah, no, I agree. We have to work with the other team. I'm not really aware of the cost. It usually is related to an hourly cost, which can be quite intense when you're doing a lot of this work. And timeline, again, I mean, Laura's given a good estimate. We'd have to check with the other team, but sometimes we do have a queue depending on our resources. So then you'd also have to add in, you know, what requests are kind of ahead of that one in the queue. So I'm afraid it's quite a complex question, even though it's a very reasonable one to ask. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So in the meantime that people maybe wants to prepare their questions or ask, I will kind of share our next webinar in September. We haven't set up a webinar page yet, which will be in August, and also we send an email with more details in August about our presenters and then the link for registration. So stay tuned for that, and also check our webinar page. I'm sending the link to our webinar page as well. And if you are kind of sign up for a newsletter, you will receive that kind of emails notifying you about each webinar. We are trying to send this at least 3 or 2 weeks before the webinar, so you have time to kind of manage your kind of schedule. Yeah, I see that Michael from CDP added some notes.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Chen-Lu's comment, just to say we're always interested to know what your custom data requests are, and if it's the sort of thing that that we think that the rest of the members may be interested in, then that could be obviously of interest to us. So you can always either forward us details about the request, or copy us on the inquiries if you think that's appropriate, and we can help it to inform some of our future data purchases. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. And also kind of mentioning again that the presentation slide and the recording of this webinar will be posted on the webinar page. So you will access with all the links that Laura shared, in this presentation, and also the contact information. Okay, so we will stay a bit longer if anyone has any questions. Laura shared her contact. Also, you have the, the StatsCan contact that Amanda shared, so you can reach out if you have any offline questions. But if you have any questions here, please put in the chat box, or just unmute your device and ask. And if there is no question, so we would like to thank you for joining us. And I kind of see if someone else has questions. Yeah, Martin. Since that LFS at ER with age ranges would be nice to have.
Yeah, I think we have something like that in the catalog already. But Martin, I can connect with you afterwards. I think I'll forward you the link.
Amanda, I think that we can stop recording. And